Last one to raise their hands was it, Becca?
What?
You did it again.
I
Actually,
was just
Brad didn't.
thinking whether or not I left the stove on.
Why don't you can go check.
I
is my
can smell
favorite.
it. Jesse's
Did you
out
smell
there,
it?
so he'll figure it out. Well, maybe Jesse's making lunch.
Oh.
That's my favorite. Eddie,
Hope-
close the front door.
Fully. Yeah.
Yes.
I recently was asked to be on 2 different things, like 2 different events, both at this time. So this is the time for stuff to happen.
This specific time right now.
Yeah.
What were the other options? I want to know like
It
how
was a
hard do we have to
women-
work to win your time?
It was like a women in tech thing, which I was a little confused by because I think they're closing.
Yeah, that's what I
And-
thought I heard
Oh.
too.
Wait.
So wait, women who did you say it's women who codes?
It's
Or who
I don't
code?
know. There's so many women out there.
Yeah.
So many women out there.
I
Which
don't know
to
if
be
it's like
clear,
women
clear,
in
is a
code,
good
women
thing.
who code.
A very good thing.
yeah,
women
so
in
many
tech.
women tech groups. Yeah.
With all very
Yeah.
similar names. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Women who code is.
It's the same
What's
thing you're
going away?
that you're talking about, Becca, I think.
Yeah.
And then there was somebody else. Maybe I shouldn't say it because they're doing something right now, and then people will go check it out. Let's see, what is it?
Well, now I want to
is-
know what it is.
Oh, it is another. We're hosting a Women in Tech Twitter space today. Oh, that's today.
Oh.
Today a woman day. A woman day.
A woman day.
A women's day.
Wednesday, Women's Day.
It is.
That is a tongue
that-
twister in itself.
It is Mother's Day on Sunday.
I was
It
gonna say
is.
not right now.
That's right.
Oh,
but
is
yeah.
that the why?
I don't know.
We're celebrating women because there's our day, our one day.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not true. Every day is Women's Day.
That's right.
At least for me.
Around
it
the
is.
world, girls.
Arvin from Virtual Coffee is here, by the way. Arvin, how's it going?
Woo-woo.
Arvind, what's up, dude?
I need to do a better job of taking pictures with people from Discord when I see them in person. Somebody was wearing the Learn Build Teach shirt. The organizer of the conference that I went to in Florida
Oh,
was
no
wearing
way.
it the second day. Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Wait, did you go to 2 conferences? You went to Florida and then to San Francisco, right?
Yeah. So there was one in St. Pete, which is just outside of Tampa, south of some always from Tarpon Springs, which is northwest of Tampa. And then St. Pete is southwest.
Hmm.
And anyway, so it was a mix of like speaking at the conference and family stuff. And then I flew to San Francisco and Jess flew back to Memphis and then hung out with Amy and then got back home Thursday night. I didn't get home until almost 1, by the way. My flight got
My
delayed.
flight got delayed. I didn't
Yeah.
get till 2.
Oh, gross.
Ooh.
That's really bad.
How was the
That's not
conference?
fun.
Okay, so guess what the coolest thing is that we did?
Oh, I know what it is.
I hope so. This is a
No
fun thing.
idea.
Just guess. Just guess.
Saw the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, James did that. I did.
I
not.
will say that was one of the prettiest things I've ever seen. Uber driver was super weird though.
Which is why the coolest
Oh,
thing that we
yeah.
did
Oh, driverless
was
car.
we rode in a Waymo.
Oh,
Driverless car.
yes, I saw that tweet of James like
Yeah.
so.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little
It was
crazy.
actually like really nice. It wasn't
Yes.
it
No one to
wasn't
talk
scary.
to,
It was
no
totally
awkward
chill.
conversation.
Yeah, except for the conversation we were having with each other. But yeah.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, it was good.
I tried to get one while I was there last time, and like it drove right by us, but it wasn't available for booking.
Oh,
Like it must
no.
have been driving back to where it
Okay.
needed to go or something like that.
Yeah. It was I enjoyed it. and I
I'm
would
sure
say
it was
that
better
was
than swallowing
really cool.
goldfish. I can guarantee,
I was
Arvin,
wondering.
that
We had a
Swallowing
weird conversation.
goldfish.
Yeah, so virtual coffee the other day, we
I don't know. We
started
need
off
to revisit
someone
this.
someone said, yeah, I swallowed a goldfish, and then Becca's like, I swallowed a goldfish, and
Is
like,
this what
then
y'all
we
do
started.
for fun?
Okay, to be fair, I came into
Crackers?
the conversation and the only thing I heard was like, "Yeah, I swallowed it," and I was like,
It was
"What is
very
happening here?"
Code
And
of
then
conduct was
nobody
not
wanted to say
violated.
what she swallowed, and I was like, "Was it a goldfish?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Me too." So
How does
You
that
know.
happen? I mean, I'm
Um,
assuming this wasn't recently.
It was not. Well, I'm not sure when she swallowed the goldfish because I missed that part. But
I'm not
I
gonna lie,
was
this
in
sounds like a
college.
euphemism the entire
and-
time.
So I was in college and there was a frat party that I was going to with my friend at her
That sounds
school.
worse.
And to get in, you had to swallow a goldfish. A real goldfish, James.
How many goldfish died that day?
Probably a lot.
Or they
I
all
don't know.
survive. So you
Real fish?
legitimately
It was a
I was
live
eating
fish.
crackers.
It was
I
a
was like,
real
I
live
eat goldfish crackers all the time.
Yeah, no, that would be ideal. I really like those crackers.
I asked Becca, I was like, did you like after you swallow it, do you feel it like flapping around in your stomach or what happens? You know,
You definitely feel it like
something.
nauseous.
What?
How I was like 18 years old. This is 20 years ago, and it still
Alright.
makes me sick.
Becca's crazier than I realized.
Yeah.
I
mean-
I don't know what to do with this information.
You can go try it, obviously.
Obviously not do that. I'm not dumb and 18.
Oh,
This
we
is
were
the
all
year
dumb
of
and
the
18
cicadas.
once.
This is the year of the cicadas.
Not
and
for us.
people were talking about recipes.
For eating them? Why are
I
we doing
mean,
this?
What
People,
happened?
I mean, I bought my kid crickets last year. He and his friends ate crickets. It's a
Like
good source of
cooked
protein.
crickets?
And look, it's free. Yeah, they're like deep fried.
James doesn't know what to do right now.
It's gotta be a cultural thing. Now, I'm sure swallowing a live goldfish is not a cultural thing, but eating
That's a frat
insect,
party cultural
Yeah,
thing, apparently.
Yeah,
it's a Greek thing.
Eating
Apparently.
insects, yes. I'm familiar with the concept,
yeah, just
but still.
bread it, toss it some oil. You won't even know.
A little crunchy.
Sure, I believe that.
Somebody- I
Anything
wanna take the
fried goes
wings
down
off,
easy.
though.
I feel
It's
like
true.
that's the kind of thing you do when you're in another country to try their thing. I don't know people that are just collecting them at their house and frying them and eating them.
When you have an abundance and there's a scarcity of food, then you would eat a cicada.
Wait, what's the scarcity of food? You're saying that your family is under scarcity of food, so you're eating insects?
I'm not eating them because we're in Ohio and we're not getting the big cicadas this year.
Mm.
Is there a season
I
that
feel
big
so weird.
cicadas go through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like
Oh.
but this is supposed to be like the year because it's like the 7 and the 13 or something aligned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Interesting.
the last time we had big cicada season, I was a lifeguard. And I'll never forget like sitting in the lifeguard chair and like one of them got stuck in my ponytail. And I
Yeah.
couldn't get it out. So I was like screaming,
No.
like, somebody get this out of my hair. And then we
Jumped
ate
in the
it.
Pool.
Wow.
Did you
Remember-
really?
Remember back in the day when we used to talk about web development and design with a little bit of zest?
I blame Arvind. He brought it up.
Why
Gosh,
don't you do
it's
the
too
intro,
much.
James?
Like actually to start us off?
Yeah, you wanted to talk about web design and development. I think the
I
rest of
mean,
us want to talk about goldfish and cicadas.
Yeah, we
but I
might
mean,
need to do
And
Hard
interesting
pivot.
foods we've eaten.
yeah.
You started the intervention, so
Welcome everyone to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design with a little bit of zest. In this episode, we're going to talk about creating and maintaining a community-led project. Hold your applause while I wasn't prepared to scroll down to the music.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
What's up, everyone? My name is James Q. Quick, and I am a developer, speaker, and teacher.
Now
Hey,
you
I'm
gotta say
Becca.
Popcorn Becca, you know.
I am developer experience lead at OpenSauce. I'm gonna popcorn as Amy.
hello. My name is Amy Dutton. I am a core team member on Redmond.js.
Hey y'all, my name is Brad Garapi. I'm a full stack developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
Sorry, this is
And
Chris. You actually
Chris.
did really well because I'm supposed to cue you up.
You
and
read
you
you
paused.
read the notes. That's
Yeah, that's good. I like it. And we are joined by a special guest, Chris Nowicki, also nickname of Wix, who I've been working with on the Steals for Devs project. And he's been working probably, or at least connected to everyone here in some capacity. What's the background noise? Oh, thank you, Becca. We should keep all of these intros, by the way, and people will respond to it. Anyways, Chris, welcome to the show. Do you want to tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, James. My name is Chris Nowicki, and I am a career transitioner working to break into tech as a full stack DevRel educator, maybe. We're seeing what opportunities await for me as I try to break into the tech industry. So, yeah.
Love it. Do you want to do like another minute or two on that, on the background of breaking in tech, like why you're thinking about it, what you're looking for, what you've been doing?
Yeah. So really what happened was I've been in my career, I've been in the aerospace defense industry for 17 years. And a couple of years ago, they started moving me up into management out of an independent contributor role. And the more I do management, the more I miss doing creative stuff. And I realized that I have a really creative mind. I like doing creative things and building things and making things. And 2 years ago, I remembered, I was like, in college, I did some cool web development stuff. Let me check out what it's like now. And to be fair, that was back in like 2000. So I learned about React and all these other things and enrolled in a boot camp with Coding Dojo. And I needed something that was a little bit more structured because tutorial hell was not doing me justice. I needed something structured, right? So I joined a boot camp, did that, graduated in, I did that April of 22 through November of 22. And then after I graduated, just been trying to figure out my place in the tech world and slowly getting involved in tech communities. And really, I just have a passion for communities, for developing, for coding. Coding just brings me joy and happiness. So that's why I would want to transition out of management and go into development.
How was the boot camp experience? Did you think you got a lot out of it? Like, were you able to pick up web dev pretty easily?
Yes. So I thrive in a structured environment because ADHD. And I loved it. I thought it was absolutely great for solo developing. I had a syllabus. I had stuff that I had to create. I think that they did an excellent job from beginning to the very end of when you do a big project. So they broke it up into your first 4 weeks is your basic HTML, CSS with a little bit of JavaScript, very tiny.
With a little bit of zest.
I was
With a little
expecting
bit of
zest. Yeah.
I should have used that. And then I enrolled in 2 stacks. So I did Python stack. So I went into that first. And so that was 8 weeks of Python, doing Python, MySQL. And then after that was 8 weeks of Mern. And then they do 4 weeks of a project where they pair you up with people and you get a little experience working in a team. But it's not really the greatest experience. So I think it was more benefited just a structured way of learning what I needed to know. And then from there started building projects to learn more.
Was this one of those boot camps that like would help you get a job or apply for jobs after it was over? Or do they pretty much like leave you to your own devices after that?
Oh no, I'm a part of a Discord. They have a thing for life of helping you find a job. So as I paid the money for it and it's part of the tuition. So they'll help me out. I think the challenge is there's a lot of people in boot camps trying to break in, and there's not a lot of I have to be the one to pursue their help. And I did that for a while, and it's nothing against them. I think they're a great boot camp. I think they're just swamped with so many developers graduating, looking, so many who maybe had jobs and are out of jobs. So I chose a different approach to stop using them and just start getting involved in the community and use that as a way to get my name out there to then hopefully get connections to apply for and at least get in for an interview,
I actually think that's a better way to go. It's a smart choice. And I can
Yeah.
tell you from experience, the job market right now is weird. People are hiring, but I feel like there are lines out the door of very qualified candidates waiting for those spots to pop up everybody's like jumping around right now. It's like one of those seasons, you know. My referral list is getting huge at Atlassian. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's about who you know now. I mean, that's what I've had more opportunities by getting involved in the development community, whether it's through virtual coffee, whether it's through Learn Build Tech and James's community, and now being involved with a cohort with Shashi. You know, I think just getting involved. Here's what I figured out. It's kind of like a little hack for those that are out there trying to break into tech. Get involved in communities, not to get something out of the community, but to give into the community. When you change your mindset of giving into a community, and I was in a virtual coffee breakout room once, and someone goes, "I'm brand new. I have nothing to offer." I said, "False. There's thousands of people just starting out like you. You just learned how to, use Tailwind CSS. Post about it, because there's someone out there who is looking to relate to someone brand new learning, right?" And so I think when we change our mindset to, I'm going to give into this community, I'm going to support this community, I'm going to help share my knowledge, that grows your community. And then it actually, almost without intentionality, it validates yourself. I remember being at that conference. I met Brad for the first time at that conference. Him and I were talking after, we sat by each other at the barbecue night. And we were talking about, the problem with Next.js and all of the forced server side rendering, forced caching that it has in certain areas. And we talked a lot about it in my experience and his experience. Then we were by the bonfire talking, and he goes, "So, hey, who do you work for?" And I go, I don't have a job as a developer yet. And he goes, "I don't understand. Why not? You sound like you know what you're talking about." And that is from just sharing what I know. I didn't go into it and be like, "Hey, here's this Brad guy." I had no clue who Brad was. I'm just sharing what I know, talking about what I love. And then that resulted in, for me, some affirmations that I didn't know that I needed, because I had no measure of where I stood as I am trying to break into tech.
Yeah, and the other part of that mindset too is, I don't have anything to offer, but it doesn't take into account all of the other things that it takes to be a developer, right? Like, there are core skills that it takes. There are transferable skills that you're bringing from whatever your past has been. And you can always help somebody with those things as well. Like, help them figure out how to ask the right question, or to talk about the things that they're working on, or, whatever it might be. But huge fan of horizontal mentoring. I think it's super important. And I think that's how we keep fresh eyes on all of our projects that we're doing, to always recognize that people have something valuable to provide.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, it's funny that you mentioned, I didn't realize that Brad had said this to you, that you sounded like you worked somewhere. And you and Dominic were two people, just the way that you talk and carried yourself, I would have assumed were in the industry as well. I knew your story more. I didn't know Dominic's as much. So I actually knew that you weren't, but I've told several people in the conversation that we have, and I want to transition to that. It was like, this guy obviously understands, from my perspective, way more than you should at your experience level. And that was super cool. So that conversation was, I was working on a project called Deals for Devs. We've talked about this a few times on the podcast. And you were kind of looking for opportunities, I think, to get into something a little more hands-on, a little more realistic, like real world project. And so we just talked about that, and you decided to get involved. So why was that something that you were interested in? And we'll kind of give some of that background, and then we'll transition into the tech stack and some of the stuff that you've been working on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. So I actually was watching this podcast live, and James, someone in the chat said, "Hey, James, can I help or something?" And I thought about it. I'm like, why have I not asked James if I can help on something? I've connected with him in the past. We weren't close friends or anything, but we were acquaintances, connections, heart. And so what I decided to do was, I said, you know what? I'm going to that conference. I know he's going to that conference. Let me just reach out. So I reached out to James, and I said, "Hey, man, if there's any projects you need help with, I saw you on the Compressed FM podcast. Do you need any help? I have capacity to help." And the reason why is because I was working on my own projects. I was using frontendmentor.com, and I was taking their projects and turning them into full stack projects, which, hey, great, fun, cool. It shows that I can take a Figma file, turn it into something, and I can think through, data structures and databases and make it all full stack. Cool. But I wanted to work on something that was actually going to be used in real world and for someone that knows what they're doing. And so, I just reached out to James, and then I asked him a few times at that conference. We sat down for an hour. We talked. He talked to me about a couple of projects he was working on. What really connected for us on Deals for Devs was how he was wanting some sort of a subscription service using Resend. And I had previously added Resend to my portfolio site at the time, just to practice. I was like, what is Resend? Let me figure this out. Let me practice it. So I know my portfolio site is like my hacking site. If there's a new technology I want to learn, I integrate it for a little bit, figure it out. If I like it, great. If not, and I think Resend is great, by the way. So yeah, we connected on that. I said, hey, I know how to do that. He goes, you do? And I go, yeah. And we talked through it, and we figured that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, I think it's another thing too, is not only hearing the level of technical conversation you were able to have, but also just the dedication to being proactive and reaching out and being a part of it, and the amount of work that you've done so far. So I want to transition into the tech stack and let you talk a little bit more about that. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors today, which is Postman, because building anything with any tech stack, it isn't able to be done without a good set of tools, and Postman is one of those things. And Amy and I, at the time of recording this, just came back from PostCon, which was an absolutely incredible event. I think we both had an amazing time getting to meet people on the team, getting to see other community members, and learning more about the product. And it's actually pretty impressive what all Postman can do, because we typically think of it as just HTTP requests. It can actually do HTTP, GraphQL, WebSocket requests, which are really cool. There's a public API network where companies can list their APIs, and you can clone down or fork their kind of repository for their APIs and have that locally in your projects. There's team collaboration. You can now save environment variables in Postman. All this stuff is really, really cool and really powerful, including Postbot, which is their AI bot for Postman. And it can write scripts and things to test your API requests and have that be done automatically. There's just a ton that Postman can do to be involved in every aspect of the API lifecycle. So thank you to Postman for sponsoring. Thank you for having us in person at PostCon 24. And show some support and go and check out Postman.
You also got some pretty killer swag, James. I mean, can we talk about that for a second?
Swag was pretty cool. We got a Nike hoodie, a JBL speaker, an AirTag, a tote. Am I missing anything, Amy? Is that everything?
Everyone needs a good conference tote.
Oh, the backpack.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, the travel backpack is so nice. It's like,
oh, that's legit.
A little sling. Oh wait,
Mhm.
there we go. It's backwards.
little sling backpack. So if you're just like walking around a city, want to take like a portable charger and a bottle of water and like that sort of thing, it's perfect. Also for just carrying around, if you're doing content at a conference or something, you don't want to carry your big backpack, you could carry that with like a portable light and a small microphone and that sort of thing. It's really nice. So
It'll
yeah,
fit an
dope
iPad.
swag. Mhm.
8 liters, if that means anything to people.
Not
But
to me.
most of the crossbody sling stuff I have is too small for
Hmm.
my iPad. So I love
Yeah.
the fact that it'll fit. I have an 11-inch, but it'd probably fit the next size up.
Yep.
Cool.
Sweet. So Chris, this is, well, I guess just your opportunity to kind of talk about the tech stack. So this is something that you kind of walked into the middle of, but I think you're very well capable of introducing the tech stack for Deals for Devs. So do you want to kind of talk about what the overall tech stack is, and then maybe we could get into some of the specific stuff that you worked on, which was a lot of different things, but specifically the email subscription workflow for people that are interested in signing up for deals?
Yeah, absolutely. So the tech stack that we are using is we're using Next.js as our React framework. We are using Resend to handle all of our emails for when we start sending out notifications on new deals, stuff like that. We're using React Email to format those emails, Tailwind CSS. We are using Zeta for our database provider, and we're using Prisma now that Zeta allows you to use Prisma, which has
What?
been, yes, they just announced it a month and a half ago, I think.
Mhm.
And as soon as they did, James was in there hacking away to transition over. I actually did the PR review for that, which was kind of cool. Like James Quick reached out to me to review his PR. I'm like, this is so cool. And anything I'm missing on that? I think that's all we're using. And Sentry. We're using Sentry. Sorry. So we're using Sentry to be able to take a look at all of the errors that are happening behind the scenes, keep track of everything, make sure the app is functioning well.
Can we take a beat and just say why that's significant that they support Prisma? Like,
Yeah,
what
I
does
want to
that
know the
do?
same thing. Like, what's the reason for transitioning at that point?
Yeah. So I think what happened is before they didn't have a PostgreSQL service. Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I don't think they had that before. It was kind of their proprietary schema that they used, and it worked great. And then they offered their PostgreSQL service not quickly, but it came shortly after another service shut down. And
What's the service shutdown? What are we talking about?
That's very vague.
Is this a planet scale reference?
Yes, planet scale reference. And I don't think they did it because of that, but it was very convenient that, they came out with that. And
They
so
I'll clarify a couple of things really quickly. So
Thank
planet
you.
scale didn't shut down per se. They got rid of their free tier, which is a shutdown for a lot of use cases. Planet scale is based on MySQL.
Yep.
Zeta has always been built on top of Postgres. So Postgres was always there, but Zeta didn't give you direct access to the Postgres layer. And that's
Got it.
something, actually, when I worked at Planet Scale, when it was it still is MySQL, but the number one question we always got was, does it support Postgres? So I think the idea that tons of developers love Postgres, they're used to it, they have tooling around it, is something that from a Zeta perspective, they wanted to be able to enable all of those developers to have direct access to Postgres in addition to the features that they add. So one of the benefits of Prisma, it's used a lot. You're abstracted away from the database completely. It's not dependent upon Zeta specifically. It's just dependent upon a Postgres database. The caveat to that, though, which I was actually talking about in documentation conversations this morning, is Zeta has a few features that they provide on top of Postgres, which you cannot reference through Prisma. And that is their ability to do search, one. So Zeta actually replicates your data to Elasticsearch, and that provides a seamless API through their SDKs, the Zeta SDKs, to do search, which is really, really neat. And then secondly, the other thing we're doing, and Chris, you may want to talk about this a little bit more, is uploading images. So Zeta actually has kind of built-in file blob column support. And that is something that they've built on top of Postgres, which is not directly accessible to interact with through Prisma. So we actually have a couple of specific things that we use the Zeta SDKs for, and then everything else, basic CRUD operations, now is going through Prisma.
Yep.
Prisma does support full text search in preview mode right now.
Interesting. There's like a deep article that I read at one point that the Zeta team read that compares being able to do full text search with Postgres directly versus using something like Elasticsearch.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
The short takeaway I think from that was like you actually have to have some pretty decent database technical knowledge to understand how to do that and how to optimize it. And then even so, you may not get as good as performance as something like Elasticsearch.
Yeah, Elastic is going to blow it out of the water
Yeah.
in performance for sure.
Yeah,
The
but worth looking
other-
into.
The other thing I would tack on with Prisma is that you don't have vendor lock-in at that point, because
Yep.
then you can just change your environmental variables and say, well, we don't want to go with Zeta anymore. We want to go with whatever, fill in the blank,
Neon,
or vice
whatever.
versa. So I've kind of bumped into that working with a backend as a service. I've built everything with the WYSIWYG editor, which is cool, but I had the thought I'm locked into their APIs
Mhm.
because I'm
Yeah. I'd say the
using
other
their
benefit,
Wiki-Click.
yeah, I would say the other benefit is when James and I were working on this before Prisma was allowed to be used, I had to send a note to James saying, "Hey, man, I need a table. I need a column. Can you create it for me?" And then when I migrated to my own, so now we're on the deals for devs. We're kind of rolling out everyone using their own resend key Zeta database. That way we don't have to share env variables with everyone. And what's nice about this is now I can update the Prisma schema, and then when we do a pull request, and we just have to do a few little commands to update, migrate, and then that's pretty easy, rather than telling James, hey, you need to go in before you push this to production, you need to go in and create these tables or columns.
Well, and I know Zeta supports branching, but you
Mhm.
can also have a local version of your database that you're working with
Yeah.
versus like having to run everything on their production server.
Yeah, we were using the James's dev branch, not production branch, but the dev branch. But then it got to the point when he opened it up full open source to his community, it got a little crazy with env variables being needed, and so I think that's been one of the challenges that James has been trying to tackle there.
Yeah, I talked about this maybe on the podcast, but I definitely did, Becca, with our Twitter space a few weeks ago or a month ago, however long that's been, is we're still sharing a lot of environment variables. And that is not the way we should contribute. Did y'all lose me for a second?
Just for a second.
Just for a second.
Okay. I saw that no one else was moving, and I was like, either I'm very boring or where should I start back at?
You said Becca and I, Twitter space,
Okay.
environmental variables.
Okay. I feel like it's still kind of going in and out for me, but hopefully it'll be okay. So Becca and I talked about this on Twitter space several weeks ago, and we're still sharing environment variables with people that are contributing to the project, which is not ideal. It's not what we want to do long term. So that's where we're looking to get people at the very least to set up their own Zeta database. And one of the really cool things about this is we can, because we're using Prisma, they can create a database in the Zeta UI, and then from the checked out code, run a Prisma DB push after they create environment variables, and that will push all the tables to their database. Previously, they would have to manually create their tables to be able to get like their own version of matching schema. Now they can just do a push. And one other thought, someone mentioned like local DB setup. It's not perfectly that way, so we could use a local Postgres instance. We still have the dependency on Zeta specifically for those two features, which are search and file uploads. So we could abstract a little bit, or we could abstract just the database interactions completely away from Zeta that are just the CRUD operations, but not those specific two features that we are leveraging Zeta for.
Yeah. So that's the stack we're using. We love it. It's great. And that's it. That's the end of the podcast. No.
The most important question is, what's your VS Code theme and font?
Okay. All right. So my VS Code theme is, I actually have Dracula Pro. And I'm using the
Shout
Van
out
Helsing.
to Zeno.
I love, in fact, at one point in time, I reached out to the guy who develops their website, like, hey, do you need help? I saw that you transitioned to Tailwind. So that'd be cool to get involved with. So I have Dracula Pro. And then my font, I need to go look at what the font I'm using. But yeah, I love it. It's a very dark theme, bright colors, kind of my deal. I like the purple colors. So yeah, that's my, what is my, I'll have to look at that in a minute, and I'll let you know by the end. But
so other than having to deal with sharing env variables, what have been some of the variables? I had 1 cup of coffee today, and I think it's just like throwing me off. That's certainly not enough. What have been some of the challenges that you haven't expected in this project, especially Chris, like if you want to share too, kind of, rolling into this and accepting more responsibility the more you contribute?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge for me is learning how to be a maintainer. So we're doing this project with James is the first time that I've been a maintainer for anything. And so I think getting used to that is probably, and James and I are exploring that together. We're trying to figure out, what does that look like? I think at first, James and I did a lot of troubleshooting when we got, we had to bring it into an organization. So we got the organization set up, right? And we had to go through that whole process. We set up, a standard for issues, kind of some issues templates. And that was a lot of great first issues for some people coming in that really helped us out a ton. I think for us, it's coming up with the game plan. Right now, we're still in, we're still collecting emails, but we don't have deals displayed. And so we're trying to finish all that up. And I think it's just planning out who's going to do what, get all the issues out there, and then getting everyone to work on it. And just like something that I'm facing on another group project, it's dealing with the multiple merges, merge conflicts, branches, what issue makes sense to do first that's going to cause the least amount of conflicts if you're doing a lot of changes inside of the app itself.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things you don't know about becoming a maintainer until you kind of get into it. And it can be a huge time suck until you kind of learn those power ups too, right? Like having issue forms, creating PR templates, like those, it might not seem like that big of a deal, but that can save you so much time. Brad, I think that you were going to say something. It looked muted on my end, so I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to interrupt.
And I was muted. Classic. I was going to ask about like the planning and decision-making process. So like, what do you use to store the issues? And then what's the decision-making process about, just what to build and then in what order? How does that work? Is it community driven? Is it just single person kind of passing it down and saying, here's the roadmap? What's it look like?
I would say it started off as a vision from James, right? So right now we're trying to get MVP out the door with everything displayed. We broke it down first by taking a look at, let's get a subscription system in place so we can collect emails and have that available for when we start implementing emailing out monthly all the new deals that have been added in the last month, or however we decide to do that. So that was kind of step one. We needed to collect emails. Okay. Then once we got that piece done, James was working with one of his designers who's really phenomenal, by the way, really creates some great stuff. And then James and I took a look at that, and James goes, all right, we talked, and I said, maybe we do this next and we do this next. And we started creating issues for key things. For example, we needed to be able to add a new deal. Well, James was working on the multi-step form for his other site. And I kind of piggybacked off that a little bit and continued development for Deals for Devs. And now we're kind of at the last few stages. Once I think we get the MVP up, then it'll be taking in community driven recommendations for, hey, we would love to see this. Hey, we would love to do this, or it'd be cool if this, but we need it up and running first with the list of deals that people can use to where it's useful to the development community.
And as these features are rolling out, are you doing like releases at a certain point, or is everything like continuous integration and delivery where as you're contributing to the site, stuff's rolling out?
Right now, we are not doing continuous integration. I think we've been merging into our dev branch, and then when James thinks we got a good viable product to bring to production, then he merges that into the main branch. We haven't, at least James and I haven't discussed about how we're going to handle that in the future. I'm sure we might do releases in the future. I just started learning about releases through the Shashi's Gridiron Survivor project that I'm working on. And I'm learning a ton about that. And I've been having a blast. I've helped them do 2 releases so far to their main branch. So we have to figure that out. This is, I think we're still in those stages of figuring out how we're just get MVP up and running and then figure it out from there and structure it. And I think we brought on one other maintainer to help us out, because I still have my day job until I get my new dream job one day.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think I would actually, Chris, love for you to bring whatever experience you have working with Shashi and team to this project as well, because this is something still that's new for me. But right now, like you said, we're kind of, I think just because we're so early on, there's a ton of things to figure out. So I don't think we're in a place yet to just like build a feature, ship a feature. And so we're kind of doing a more of a major-ish, like whatever you want to call it, release.
Yeah.
And that will be what Chris has been talking about of, we did kind of the first one, which was just a basic landing page with a you can subscribe here. And Chris built the subscription preferences, which we hadn't talked about in depth yet, which is pretty cool. So that was there. And so the next step is this MVP version that he mentioned, where we're gonna we need to actually get some deals. That's one of the things we need to start doing. But he just worked on the multi-step form. Again, another thing that's huge and like way more complicated than you would think. And so
Yeah.
the ability to add deals, and then we'll have the listing of deals on the website. So we have the form, we need to get the listing, and then we need to get some deals, and then we'll take that, put all those features in the dev branch, or migrate that to staging branch, and then tag that in some way. Like, I don't know exactly what our formal
Yeah.
process is, but have that be tagged as like, this is, I don't know, V1 maybe, who knows, and then ship that to production. And then I think from there we'll have enough worked out of flow to be able to do that on a more ongoing basis, like continue the
Yeah.
workflow of publishing to dev and then taking that to staging and then promoting to main to production. But I think we'll be able to move a lot faster for individual smaller features after we kind of get through this kind of initial release.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the ways I really like to handle that, so you don't have like long running development type branches, is merge all your code to main, but then only release as you tag versions. So you could be developing the full Deals for Dev product on main, merging your dev branches into main, and then you're like, okay, we're ready. It's looking good. Drop a V1, and then anytime you tag a release, run a GitHub action that does all your pushes and migrations and things that you need to do.
That's how we're doing our project at Redwood, is that everything gets pushed to main.
Yeah.
And then for each of our
Mhm.
releases, you'll create a new branch. You'll hear people say, I'm going to cut a release.
Got to release,
Or
yeah.
create a new branch that's tagged, just as Brad mentioned. And we have release tooling to help cherry pick all that stuff, because it starts to get a little complicated when, like in our case, we have all of our RSC and SSR stuff on main, and none of that is currently being implemented in V7 of Redwood. So there's like some crazy stuff right now trying to manage all that.
Yeah. And then, of course, you can always do stuff like feature flagging. If you want to live in a more
Mhm.
continuous delivery world, you can just feature flag new things. But I think
And flag it off. Yeah.
in y'all's situation, with such a big change coming from just the landing page to like the MVP, you drop that first one and then get into the habit of that continuous delivery.
I'd actually be curious really quickly about that flow for merging to main on a consistent basis. Because how would you do something like a hot fix for something that's in production? Like, you'd have to, I don't know how you would take, like, here's the version of code that's in production, pull that, make a change to it, and then ship that immediately without shipping all the other things that have been checked into main so far.
You can check out the current release version, apply the hotfix, and then cherry pick that
Just
back
cherry pick.
into main.
Yeah,
So you're, like,
this is lack of
comparing-
experience with cherry picking on my end too. So
Yeah,
I'm
I've
like,
never heard
I
of
don't
that term,
quite
so-
fully understand that.
Yeah. So cherry picking, you're just picking a certain commit that you want to apply to your thing. So, like, for example,
Oh.
we have version 7 that's like the current stable version of Redwood. And then, so that's like the branch is called like version 7 or something like that, or dot, whatever the minor is. And then you have your main branch. And so then when you cut a release, you can start with the version 7 branch. I think that's how that works. And then we just pull from main the commits that make sense. That way you're not pulling in all the SSR and
Oh, so your production branch is the release branch, not the main branch.
right.
That does make
That's
sense.
where I was getting
Got
lost. James, I was
Same.
with you. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yep.
Production branch, and then
Brad, I know what feature flags are. I've never written them. And so just out of curiosity, are you like wrapping all of your code in conditionals? Because that feels like code bloat.
Yes, that is essentially what it is. But
Okay.
what feature flags are a tool, and they have really good use cases and really bad use cases. So if you are writing a new version of a button, or changing the look and feel of a form, or changing the return, or let's say UI stuff, right? Feature flags work really well. When it comes to logical stuff, like, hey, I'm changing the shape of this data, and you're trying to maintain 2 versions of an object, don't do it, right? Feature flags have places where they work really well. Feature flags are also dangerous because they're delivered at runtime, right? Launch Darkly, let's say if you're using that as a service, holds these at runtime. And if for any reason Launch Darkly goes down, things have problems. And big companies at scale like Atlassian actually take all their Launch Darkly feature flags and put it in a Redis cache. And guess what? Now you have issues flooding the Redis cache. Like all of this becomes a problem because it's runtime. But if all operates well, it's really easy to flip that switch on or off and show your feature to a subset of users or all your users or only on this branch. Or you can, of course, caveat every feature flag with all sorts of like metadata.
Interesting. Yeah, I was poking around my Vercel dashboard the other day, and if you do their preview PRs, which is kind of cool. So basically what that means is if you have a PR, it will go ahead and push all of that code. Yeah, so you can see the website that you're looking at instead of, say, having to pull that down and launch it locally. You can do all that in a single place, and you can comment on stuff. But anyways, in their toolbar, there is a feature there to toggle feature flags or show different feature flags. My projects, I don't have any, so that's empty. But I was like, oh, that's interesting that they offer that built in.
Yep.
That's cool. Yeah, I think, Brad, you kind of alluded to this, but some companies just have the process of just ship to production behind a feature flag.
Yes.
Until we're ready to enable it. So you just ship it, but no one knows it or experiences it until you ship the next thing that says like, okay, we can use this, or you just enable and it pulls dynamically the feature flag or whatever, and then it's enabled to actually show and be used by people.
Yep. Yeah, and for the most part, like all of Atlassian uses feature flags. They just move too fast and ship too many incremental updates. You know, when you're a established product, it's a whole lot easier to ship incremental updates than to like try to organize across 100 and something person team to be like, is this the right code that needs to be in this release that we're cutting? Like when you're a product, you should be shipping incremental features.
Yeah.
But Amy, like we talked about in a previous episode, when you're shipping a framework, you kind of really need to say, this is the next version of the framework and this is what's going to be supported in it. So feature flags don't necessarily work as well there.
Do you ever
there was a fun
Oh, sorry. Let me ask one quick question.
You're good.
Really quick.
Yep.
Do you ever go back through and rip all that stuff back out? Like after that feature is like committed, it's in. Do you have to do all that refactoring to take that out?
100%. So like anytime you create a feature flag, a lot of companies have different workflows for this, but there's sometimes automation where it's like when you create the story that says make a feature flag, it automatically creates a story that says clean up the feature flag. So feature flag cleanup is a big thing. There's also a lot of automation in place that we have that looks at, hey, find all the feature flag code in our code base. Go check with Launch Darkly and check the last time, that feature flag has been requested or if it's been enabled for X amount of time. And then automatically create issues to say, hey, go clean this up because it obviously hasn't been being used. So yeah, it becomes a huge process and huge overhead, but it allows teams of hundreds of people to ship code continuously without having to all align on a single release.
That actually makes sense.
It's cool stuff.
Yeah. That's cool.
And yeah, and as Nick was pointing out, he's saying you can do gradual feature flag rollout. Feature flags can be used to do A/B testing, only enabled for particular user segments or certain accounts or paid or free. So they have a lot of flexibility baked in.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, James, we should do all the I'm just kidding. We
do all the flags.
Just do.
I think so I am talking behind the scenes to Launch Darkly to potentially get into that. So we'll see.
Interesting.
Maybe a partner that we work with and get to do all the things that we're saying.
You should do it because honestly, for everybody working on the project, working with feature flags is a big plus for looking for big corporate jobs.
Yeah.
And it's going to allow you, once your MVP gets out or your like 1.0 gets out, it's going to allow you to ship faster without having to like deal with all this fixing main and all this stuff. Like you're saying, you just develop new features behind a flag and everybody can kind of just keep developing and pushing code.
I think it's a valid point, Brad. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you going, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. And not in a negative way. I'm just like, this is great cherry picking, flagging. I'm going, I do PRs based on a branch that I create out of dev for most of the things I work on, and make sure I'm pulling down the latest before I create a new branch. And that's what I do. And it's interesting as someone who's trying to break into tech who doesn't have experience I would love not through this specifically, but in general, going, man, I wish there was resources out there that could give me practice in those areas to practice that type of stuff and get familiar with that type of all the different ways corporations run, especially larger type corporations. I'm not applying to FANGs or anything like that. Unless Shonda wanted to hire me to Netflix, I would definitely take a job with her at any point in time. Shameless plug. But you know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of gaps, and that's where it kind of ties into what you asked at the beginning. That's what boot camps can't provide. They can't provide all of that experience, all of this terminology. The only way that you get it is by getting involved in open source projects.
But some of that's also specialized. Like Brad and I have a conversation all the time where the stuff and the problems that he runs into at Atlassian are completely different than like your indie hacker, indie Twitter problems. And so people can talk about stuff that, oh, this is hot, let's try this. And he's like, we have to have stable things that we know are going to run. And so the problems are very different. You're talking about feature flags. I know what they are, but I've been in tech for 22 plus years and have never written a feature flag before. There's also a difference. We had, oh goodness, this is embarrassing. I forgot his name. Corey Miller from ConvertKit on, and he is a marketing front end person. And so the problems that he has doing front end for marketing websites are very different than the problems you'd have doing front end for product and even full stack for product. And so I think, some of it depends on where you end up. If you end up working at an agency or you end up working at a larger product company. So, if you're trying to break into tech, if you have a goal, that obviously makes it easier. But I also don't want somebody to feel overwhelmed and be like, oh man, I've got to learn all the things.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing is just, again, by just being in this conversation or someone watching, we're getting a ton, or listening, right? When the podcast is released, is, you're learning some terminology to then go and research, and at least you have a basic understanding of what that is. So if asked in an interview, you could at least explain, be honest, like, hey, I've never done this, but I understand what feature flagging is. I understand what cherry picking is, and would be able to pick it up easily. Speaking of go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No.
I was going to say, speaking of features, one of the favorite features that I've done on any project so far is the subscription system for James. That was fun. We had a really good time. Have you all worked on creating your own subscription system outside of a provided service?
I'm working on one right now.
I thought Stripe did that for you.
Yeah.
Are you talking about like purchasing subscriptions, or are you talking about like a newsletter subscription?
Newsletter. I should have been more clear. Newsletter subscriptions, not subscription based service, but actual newsletter subscriptions. And James and I were we talked a lot at the beginning about, how are we going to do this? Do we want people to be able to log in? Well, then we're going to have authorization, password resets just to log in and change what type of deals you want to subscribe to notifications from.
Okay, here's what I want to know about this subscription service, because this is the bit that I've never kind of like written myself. I get how to like template out an email, grab some data from a database, now you got it, now you send the email. How do you determine when, where, and how that runs?
Cron jobs.
Okay, so traditionally, like you can make a cron job on the command line with the cron, syntax. But this kind of means you need a long-running server to establish these cron jobs, unless you're using some kind of service that manages this.
Well,
go into those details. Like how
Love
do
it.
you manage the crons and spin one up and tear one down?
Absolutely. And it's Vercel makes it stupid easy to do.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. So here's what you do.
Wait, hold on. It's like just use Triangle Company. They make it easy. I hate how it always comes back to this, but okay, go on. Yeah, because they just seem to do everything now.
They do. What they're doing is insane. They're shipping like crazy. So I actually have 2 cron jobs currently running on my personal portfolio site, and this is how I learned it. And I actually wrote an article on cron jobs, how to create one in Vercel, and it has 10,000 views right now on Dev2. Like it gets hit. I probably get 20, 30, 40 hits a day on that thing. And so they make it so simple. So in your project, regardless if it's Next.js or something else, you create an API route. So in the app, I use the app directory. So you create an API route for a specific cron job. So it could be a get, a post, a fetch, whatever it's going to be. Okay. In my instance, what I'm doing is it's really silly, but on my end, I use it to control how many times I go out to the Twitter API, because you're only allowed 25
Right.
24 hours. Okay. So and all I do is I go out, I get my latest tweet count, and I display that on my site. Why? Because I can. But I did it to learn about cron jobs. And then what you do, you add a Vercel.json file to the root of your project, and in there they have an option to put in a cron, and you just tell it the path to where you want it to run, and then you give it the cron timing, right? So you still have to use the cron, the syntax that you would use for creating a cron job. And in my post, I kind of put a little cheat site that you can go to do that, and then it runs it. And then within specific, if you make that, let's say, an edge, you want it to run on the edge, as long as it's 10 minutes or less, it'll spin it up automatically and then shut it down.
Okay, that totally makes sense for like statically defined cron jobs. What happens if like a user says, I want this email every 2 hours with Deals for Dev? Like, how do you make that dynamic?
That's a great question, and I don't have an answer. I don't know. But the reason why we didn't approach that is because we're trying to control, it's one of the conversations that James and I have been having off and on, is how often do we want to send something out? Are we going to send something out immediately? Or are we going to send something out, once a month? For on demand, if that was an option, right, you would just have it. I would have a route that collects all of those categories and sends it via React email, and gets it out the door.
Yeah, like maybe
Yeah.
Maybe instead of saying it's not completely custom, if you have daily, weekly, and monthly, you have 3 cron jobs that run that just pull the database and check.
That's correct. Every at midnight, it sends everything that was new in the last 24 hours. Monday at midnight, or Sunday at midnight, same thing. Or at the 30th of the month, 28th, if you want to be safe, because some months don't have 30. Right. And that's how you do it. Now, I'm sure that there are ways to create more options, and I just
I'd be curious, like
Yeah.
how, even just general application development at this point, where somebody says, I want to be alerted at this schedule. And so how do you take a custom cron expression and say, okay, hit this endpoint given that custom cron expression? I'm sure there are services that do this, or you have to have a long running node server that's using node cron to like set these up and tear these down.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how to do it in a serverless way at this point, or at least none of these services out there offer something like this
at that dynamic type of a level. 1,000%. So that was challenge number one, was figuring out, all right, how are we going to do this? And we talked about that at that conference. I said, we would probably do it via cron job, which I had experience doing, which was cool because I could talk to James about that. Then the second part was, okay, so if we're going to create a subscription service that's going to utilize these cron jobs to send out monthly emails, let's say that's what we're going to do for now. The next part is, how do we do this to where a user doesn't have to log in, but there's some sort of ID attached to that user, where that user can then subscribe to, I want to subscribe to all notifications, or I just want notifications on cool hardware tech or office tech that's released, right?
Sure.
So what I did is, we made it very simple. We actually did a post on this saying, should we use, in this instance, just a generic generate a unique ID, and then when the user subscribes, you have to do a few things. We added in a column that says, are they verified? And by default, they're not subscribed to anything, and they are not verified. An email is then sent to them with a custom unique token. That custom unique token is basically their UUID, right? That's the token. And then when they click on their email, it goes in, and I have a route that says, all right, go search for this ID. Great, it's there. Then go into the database and change subscribed all, and then verified. And then we have a little badge that says verified. So it's all tied to that UUID. And then the goal is when emails go out, it'll have an option to update preferences. And we wanted to make it easy as possible. So they click on update preferences, takes them to the preference page, which was cool because at first I had to figure out how do you get searched? How do we lift this up to the URL without having to use any state for this? And how do you do that on a server component?
Query params.
And so I was able to,
original state on the web lives in the URL.
Yes.
Like we're all coming back to this idea that, hey, guess what? It doesn't live in your JavaScript application.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. James and I had to work on that a little bit. At first, it was a route that you passed in a variable, right? And then I was able to do some research because it wasn't upfront how to do that on a server component with Next.js. Once I figured it out though, and it was just me finding it in the docs. It was just my experience, but figured it out. We got that working. And so now it's really just, they can go in and we have it so they can unsubscribe to all with one button. There's no, are you sure? There's no, like, we want to make this simple as possible. And even with React Email, there's a way to tag your emails and put in there that this is coming from a mailing list so that when it goes into Google and something like that, eventually it'll show up with that little unsubscribe button to make it easy for them in their email.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, as well. And that is the subscription system. It's you sign up with your email, then you get taken to a page that says, hey, you need to verify, go to your email and verify it. And then as soon as you click verify, it routes you to preferences. You go into the preferences and then you choose, you can change it right then and there. And then as soon as emails start coming out, you can change it as you go. So we completely eliminated a user having to sign up with an account, do an email, do magic links or whatever, and just completely eliminate having to use that. So we use Clerk for our admin side so that James and I and others can go in and approve deals, make changes to deals. We still have to build out a whole dashboard for that, but that's just for the auth, right? And everything else now is just handled via this unique ID that's stored in the database.
Sweet. And so the only downside here is that like somebody could put in your email address when trying to sign up and you get an email that says verify and you're like, I don't know what this is, delete.
Right. And how we plan to handle that is via a cron job. Maybe once a month we'll go through and because that was something we had to figure out at first too,
if they haven't verified themselves in X amount of time, just clean it up.
Right. Yeah. So I'll run a cron job once a week, once a month, and they'll just go through and delete anything that's not verified.
Cool.
We haven't decided on that rate yet, but yeah, it was a really fun. Once we got that in place, that was probably the most complex one to get in, and then now it's just getting everything laid out towards the design that James has for Figma, and it's been a blast. And the other cool part about this is, before James had it open to open source, I was talking with Ryan Furr. I don't know if you heard of that guy. He's a really cool dude, doing some great things, trying to break into tech as well, and he was talking to me. He goes, how did you get involved with the project with James? And I'm like, well, James has this, PayPal site, and I didn't say that. I basically said I asked, and that's what I want to encourage, those out there who are brand new, trying to break into tech, that, it doesn't hurt to ask, don't just reach out and say, hey, though. Like I've seen so many posts about that recently where people are like, hey, look at my resume. Am I good? No, like offer your service. Say, hey, here's some value that I can add to you. How can I help? Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. And I would love to learn. I mean, James leads a community on Learn, Build, Tech. Great. Right. He's passionate about learning and other people learning as well. He's great at teaching people. So yeah, I think that's just an encouragement to anyone, no one's out of reach. You can at least ask and see if there's something you can help out with. And if they can't help you, they'll be very kind and point you into the right direction, point you to someone else that they think you could help, or, point to open source resources to find, like OpenSauce, where you can find other resources to find open source work to go and do.
One thing I did want to ask about the newsletter thing before we move on. James, you and I talked about just the problem of trying to solve sending out specific types of deals for a user. Have you guys figured that out yet?
This would be, I feel like I'm lost again.
So are you talking about, so if the user says, I only want,
Like design-ish deals, or I only want JavaScript deals. And so then they have a preference. And then when you send out the email, it's selectively sending out those certain things.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're sending out the exact same email to everybody. It's a customized email.
correct.
So James and I were talking at PostCon, like, how do you solve that particular problem? Is that templating within Resend where you can set conditionals around people with tags? Is that sending certain batches of emails? Is it like basically you're sending like 200 one-off emails, like almost as a transactional email? How does that work?
That is a great question. So there's a few things I've been thinking about this, and I don't have a solution yet. But initially, the solution is, having some sort of function where when the cron job runs, no matter what, you're going to be sending emails to all different types of people, right? You're going to have people who have all or minimal. So let's say by default, you need everything, right? So I'll just pull all the data from the database, and then I'll do a filter for each category, and then use those filters. So like I'll create a variable that is, let's say, conferences, and it's going to pull all the conferences out of the full pull, right? And the same thing for office supplies and whatnot. And then when I generate the email, probably do it in batches. So do a batch for anyone who's all, we're just going to send all of it. Great. And then, anyone who is this, great, we'll send a batch to anyone who is, something like that. So we still, all the details on what is most efficient has to be worked out, but that's how I've kind of thought about this, is getting everything, filtering it out, and then running it. One thing we do have to is there's a rate limit with Resend on how many emails per minute can be sent. And so we're going to have to build in some sort of a rate limit check just to ensure that we're not, because if you send, if we have right now, there's probably 60 people in there, James, or something like that. So it's not going to hit the rate limit, but as it grows, and I assume it will grow, and you have a couple hundred, then 1,000 or whatever people really wanting deals, then we got to be careful.
We also use Resend at OpenSauce, and so we do have different groups of people that get different drip campaigns, right? Like maintainers get one, contributors get one. Maybe there's a third one I'm missing. And those are triggered at different points. I think for them, it's mostly triggered on sign up. There's also like the option for broadcast emails. I sent one out this morning to 7,000 people, but that's like a totally different thing. But it has been really nice. And the nice thing too about React email is you can style it in a way that it looks pretty, right? It doesn't look like just, you can add design to it, right?
Yeah,
so
buttons, you can use tailwinds. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Becca, and I don't know where we're out of time here with everyone, but I'm curious how you tag that for different people for maintainers only. Is that run in Resend? Is that a tag within Resend that you do, or how do you?
So Brandon Roberts set that up for us. He's our head of engineering. Like that's on the ETL side of things. So there's definitely some type of identification for the trigger that goes out and then all of the emails are sent out through Resend. I can maybe walk you through it if you're interested.
I would love, I'm for sure interested, because I think that might help how we structure this moving forward. I want to do the most efficient thing possible. So
I'd love to hear the resolution of the conversation.
Yeah.
Part 2 coming your way.
Cool.
Part 2.
My internet has been off and on, so hopefully
we need to
I'll
get
be
James. Okay. James, we just listen. I'm just going to
we
drive
still
8
haven't
hours. I'll just drive 8 hours out to Memphis. We'll hang for a weekend. I'll redo
you
your
just set everything
internet.
up.
And I'll just set it up. For you.
I would love that. That would be fantastic. Someone asked one question I want to address as we wrap up. Someone asked about using a headless CMS to maintain deals. So right now, submitted deals just get saved to the database. And then Chris mentioned we have the admin dashboard where we can approve them. And I think we'll basically just have like for admins, you'll be able to edit that information as well. So a basic edit screen for an individual deal and mark it as approved, which would then show up on the website, that sort of thing. There is a chance we could potentially do that in the future with the headless CMS. I think we don't need anything like super fancy other than just basic update. And that's probably good enough for now, but that is a good question. And I feel like there's so many more technical things that we could go through and have conversations about. And maybe that does warrant a later on part 2, but we are over an hour for now. And because it's a longer episode, I think we can skip picks and plugs. So anyways, thank you everyone for listening in. This has been a fun one for me in particular, being that it's our project that Chris and I are both a part of. So it's been a lot of fun. And the conversation and questions, I think, have been really interesting as well. But if you're listening to this as a podcast after the fact and you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a rating and a review to help other people find the podcast and for us to continue to have on amazing guests like Chris in the future. In the meantime, that's all we got. And Ryan just joined
Becca,
right now.
Thank you for sticking
Good timing, Ryan. Yeah, thanks, Becca.
Bye.
Thank you all
See you,
for
Becca.
having me. Appreciate y'all.
It was awesome, man. Thanks for talking, dude.
Yeah, I'm honored. It's so kind of you guys to invite me on. I'm a little humbled, so thank you.
We're still
Good time,
live, just in
resume.
case that wasn't clear.
Stick it on your
I
resume.
know that was a
Oh.
positive thing
Podcast
you said.
appearance.
but
Yeah, positive thing, but thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This
know when you
is
say
when
bad
he
things,
potentially says,
Man.
that was horrible. Thanks for having me. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah, I never
That's
want to
how it
do
goes.
this again. But no, really. Y'all are wonderful people. Some of my favorite people out there. So yeah, thank you for
But yeah,
just having
stick it on your resume.
Oh, it's gonna go
Your
in my
CV.
speaking tab of my portfolio site. It's going
Nice.
on the resume. Absolutely.
Yep. Cool. All right.
Sweet.
Well, we can call it publicly.
Yeah,
Thanks
man.
everyone for joining us. We had a couple people, I think, join on Twitch for the first time. CD was one that discovered that we have a specific Twitch. So make sure to follow
Subscribe.
for
Give a rating and
updates when we
review.
go. A rating, review,
On Twitch.
follow, all the things. That's right.
Love it.
Or wherever you are.
Not a thing I know.
I know. All right. We'll go ahead and close it out. But thanks everyone for checking in. See y'all.